Well, good morning and welcome, dare I say. Good morning, welcome to London, but also good evening and welcome to Shenzhen, where we're delighted to have one of our regular guests, Professor Gong from the China Development Institute. And we're here today to have a discussion on the global economic outlook, investment, trade, and cooperation. And it has been certainly one of the benefits of lockdown is that we've all become more used to having these online sessions, which of course allows us to engage in dialogues in new and interesting and varied ways. So we are absolutely delighted. Next slide, Mike. Now, one of the things that we want to cover today in this global economic outlook is that I'm going to be hosting a conversation with Professor Gong. And what I would like to suggest, if you don't mind, is that you, the audience, really feel free to participate by putting questions into the chat room. You'll find that we can weave these in to the conversation, but please do use the chat room facility there because I'm here with you. I'm not on Zoom. I'm not on not on Teams. I'm not on Signal, and I'm not on WhatsApp. So type them in, and we'll weave them in the conversation. If you've got detailed questions or comments, please feel free to put those in as well. The professor will receive every single one of them with your email attached and can answer if necessary. But we really are delighted. You've read his CV 3 times in registering for this event. But I personally think it's a compliment that the professor comes because he does sit on the Monetary Policy Committee of China and is there to give us some really keen insights. So next slide, Mike. Now, we just thought we'd start very quickly with a little poll. The poll here is just to find out how optimistic or pessimistic you are as audience members. We, the panelists, can't vote, but do please have a look and fingers on buzzers, I think is the phrase over here, Professor Gong. Our audience does tend to be quite opinionated, so already half of the audience have voted. And I'm just going to close that poll in just a moment, and it'll give us both a flavor of how people feel. So I'm just about to close that, and there are the results. So 50% are slightly pessimistic. And personally speaking, I think that's how I feel as well. Anyway, we're going to go back to the normal slide deck and have a look, and we're going to turn to a series of questions that I would like to suggest structure a little bit our discussion. So as we return to that, Mike is just racking that up there. Okay. So our talking points today are these 6, and I certainly don't intend to read them out, but you get the flavor here. We're going to be looking very much at the impact of COVID-19, future resilience, the Ukraine, central bank digital currencies, in which, of course, China is leading. And Professor Gong, I think, has some interesting things to share with us on that. The Chinese emissions trading scheme, which for me was an enormous announcement last July when they first put out a national emissions trading scheme. China has had emissions trading schemes before, but this was a national one. And what should we be doing as a group, particularly FS Club and in the wider world, to encourage the world economy to progress? So those are our talking points. And I'd like perhaps to start with the first one, if we might, Professor. As the world continues to cope with the impact of COVID-19, what are the trends that you see in investment and trade?
Well, first of all, it's really my pleasure to join you, Michael, in this kind of the conversation. It's really, during this difficult time, we keep exchange our views, and then we keep encourage. Although I saw from the poll, no one really optimistic, no one really very optimistic, but still there are some people, 20% of people is slightly optimistic. So keep optimistic and keep a conversation, and that's a way we can do more for the economy. But anyway, for your first question, I think this question mainly about China, I would say. Most of European countries, US, Japan, and other countries are now basically reopen, I say. China still have this so-called zero tolerance policy. So it's still not yet changed Here, I would like, and then that cost quite a the economy, particularly when the large city, the city center, the international port, like Shanghai, get locked down. You can imagine what the impact that could be. What the impact on the other country and the world trade on the supply chain. So it's really still serious. But I would suggest that we think about this in the shoes of policymakers, Chinese policymakers. Why they still keep this so-called zero tolerance policy. We had this zero tolerance policy in past more than 2 years since the Wuhan lockdown. And since then, it's really zero cases. And 0 cases means 0 deaths. So that's important, the 0 deaths. For other country, when you have some deaths and then things are getting improved, that can accept it. But if in the country after 2 years with 0 deaths, suddenly you open the country, you open the society, and you got a million of infection cases, and then not a million, 100 million cases of infection, and a million deaths or 2 million deaths. That's something hard to be acceptable, right? For anyone, for us, for policymakers, it's a difficult decision. Of course, this is a political decision. It's not an economic decision. It's not a pure just a medical decision. This is a political. So we understand that it's very difficult for policymakers in China to think of how we can move forward. And people are doing a lot of things during this zero tolerance policy operation. When people watching how the other countries deal with, how the other countries result of reopening, and watching and waiting for new data to show how this Omicron, variant to do the damage, and waiting for the new data about the death rate, about the seriousness of this Omicron, and then waiting for the new the medicine for the cure, and also people are increasing and forcing the increase of the vaccination. My 97 years old mother got vaccinated last week actually. The doctor went to the home and to give her a shot. So people are making this try to increasing particularly the vaccination on the elderly, and to try to prevent the most serious consequences. So anyway, it's still I think it's still taking some time for China to move forward. But this is definitely the issue for the economy, for the investment, for the employment. China now have a big employment issue. During these months, China now have more than 10 million new graduates from universities looking for the jobs. When a lot of the layoff taking place in the country. So I would say we will still have some difficult time, with this COVID-19 for the investment, for the trade. Things are improving. People are learning the lessons, and so we try to keep for example, the transportation, the supply chain can continue, particularly Shanghai port reopen very quickly, so that will improve the situation. but still we may see some interruptions. We may see some difficulties, ahead. So we're still in the whole global economy is still in the shadow of the COVID-19, still not yet passed through this kind of the pandemic situation.
We'll move on to the next slide, but just while we do that, a question here from Doug Andrews. You indicated that it is a political decision to change policy on COVID. The 20th National Party Conference, I think, is coming up in October, November. Do you see that or any other type of incident that we should be looking at as well, around then there might be a policy change?
I really don't know. But I think the other factors are important, like what I mentioned. The new numbers of other country, and Hong Kong number are very helpful for Chinese, to understand what's going on. How the it's two things. Omicron make a lower death rate, but with a huge number of population, when the death rate may be low, but death toll may still be high. So that's a problem. And the vaccination and the new medicine and those factors, I think, are the more important. Political event may, provide some opportunities, but I'm not quite sure it's wholly determined by those kind of things.
Good. Well, I'd like to turn to resilience. We do tend to focus on the pandemic, but we have had quite a number of resilience issues completely unrelated to the pandemic. So we've had explosions in ports around the world, whether it's Beirut or fires in China or now in Southeast Asia. We've had the Suez Canal closing. And all of this has been against I would argue, a 30, perhaps 40-year trend of increasing efficiency in global supply chains to the point they're hyper efficient, they're very, very low cost, but they're, to use a phrase I like to use, they're very brittle. And once they snap, then everything seems to go to pieces. We've had a lot of discussion here in the West about that. And I think one of the difficulties is determining how much fat, if I can call it that, how much fat do you put in the system so that you can get through a bad period. The problem, of course, is in many ways competition. I put fat in my system, but if it's not used, my neighbor makes a lot more money than I do, and I've just wasted it. What is the Chinese view on resilience?
Well, both pandemic, during this pandemic, and then we have some conflict in the world, in some war and something, and all those things are really reflect or shows to us that there are some problem in past, for the globalization, for the formation of the new supply chain in the era of globalization. We have to admit it, the global supply chain in the past has been maybe too much concentrated in certain areas, including China. As a Chinese economist, I would like to see all the supply chain stay in China, all companies come into China, but admit it, we have to admit it that maybe that's too concentrated, too much concentrated. We need some kind of diversification of the supply chain, among the regions, among the countries, in terms, to give more consideration, more attention to the transportation, the continuation of transportation of any event which may interrupt this kind of the supply chain. So from that point of view, I would say certain degree of diversification and the regionalization of the global supply chain may be is needed, maybe needed for us to improve the resilience of the supply chain of the world. So that means with, this is a trade-off. We need a sufficiency. We need the division of labor in the industry, among the industry, and within the industry, and we need the division of labor of the regions of the countries. But at the same time, we need to consider the other factors, which reviewed by this time by the pandemic and the conflict. So pay more attention to the continuation when some interruption took place, and we continue to have this supply chain. Without interruption of supply, particularly the supply, to maintain this, the trend of the trade and the investment and the supply to continue to support the market in the different places rather than in few places.
Okay. Just as we move on to the next question, on that last point on resilience, we may have to be terse, Professor, but Dan Fianey is curious, is there a talent disconnect here where your graduates are coming out into a slightly changed world? Is that partially responsible for the lack of employment?
No. The unemployment is caused by the interruption of the production,
okay,
of the market, but the graduation is taking place at the same time. So this graduation is not caused by is another cause of unemployment, but it will add the problem to the unemployment. So that's normally in other time, something like 70–80% of the graduates would got the job when they come out of the school. But this year, never looks very bad, and this adds the problem of the unemployment anyway.
Okay, well, our third area of discussion was price stability, and in many ways, and I think as economists, we're pretty relaxed about prices bouncing up and down. That's what it's about. That's what markets do. If an iPhone is very expensive, well, that's just supply and demand. But when it hits food, then it starts to bite, and it has many other ramifications. So we've certainly seen the first few bounces since the Russian invasion of Ukraine on the 24th of February. It now looks as if this is going to be a long-running, simmering conflict for some time. What do you think that foretells on price stability?
Yeah, well, of course, now people blame the commodity prices and caused by the pandemic and interruption of the supply chain, and also the war, the conflict also interrupted the supply chain. So when the supply problem come out, now we look at the supply side very much, But I would like to remind us of the demand side problem. In past years, so many countries issued so much money, particularly some countries which issued international money, and they adopted a very quantitative easing monetary policy, which first of all, those money flooded not the commodity market and the goods market. The money went to asset market, both the housing market and the stock market, to push those prices up. So if we're talking about inflation already there. It's not come to the goods market, but it's already on the assets market. So then we have this interruption of the supply chain of goods market. Then we have the problem of supply demand problem on the goods market. Then we saw this inflation of both producers market and consumers market. So this is actually last effect of those monetary policies, quantitative easing monetary policies. Some countries still have so-called super easing monetary policy in some country, like Japan. So those factors contribute to current, inflation as well. Not only, now more attention paid to the supply chain, but actually I believe the so-called traditional monetary theory, it's a money issue. It's a monetary policy issue. When they issue too much money, eventually, sooner or later, you will have inflation. If you have a super easing policy, monetary policy, you may have hyperinflation. So in the end, so I would say definitely we need to pay attention to this supply chain issue, but we also need to pay attention to the monetary policy issue, which started from the global financial crisis in 2008, 2009, and afterward, most of developed country, Western country, have quite a relaxed monetary policy. And after the pandemic, it's become super easing. So that's one of the causes of inflation. This is a long tail effect. Now we finally got these consequences, we got this result, but this is not only the supply side issue, it's also demand side issue. And we need to take this lesson for our future management of the macroeconomy and the global economy as well.
Yes, we're certainly learning a lot, particularly a lot on micro indicators, advance notice. I mean, we really dropped.
Particularly, in a quite a long time, when we have globalization, we have a improvement of efficiency of the manufacturing, the production. So it seems that we issue a lot of money, but it seems we have sufficient supply. So that we for the long time we didn't see inflation, but actually inflation taking place. First of all, in the asset market, then eventually it come to to the consumer market, to consumer goods. So during that time, without inflation, without the CPI inflation, I mean consumer inflation, people say, oh, no problem, we issue more money and then we can do everything we like, but actually you already to have the problem there, and only later on you see the result, but actually it happened, what the causes are taking place in a very long time ago.
Well, we always go back in the West to Milton Friedman on this one about the issuance of money, which turns us nicely to our next topic of discussion, central bank digital currencies. I've long pointed out that one of the interesting things I don't think people have remarked about central bank digital currencies is that potentially, if they were designed in certain ways as opposed to others, we as economists would for the first time know the real quantity of money and the real velocity of money, which we've actually never really known. We've only guessed at. So that's kind of one interesting bit for us. The cryptocurrency people like to claim that central bank digital currencies are cryptocurrencies. Well, they're not. I mean, nobody is using a consensus mechanism. They're not even using blockchains. So they're actually unrelated. And the CBDC arguments, I feel, have been misrepresented in the popular press. It was proceeding long before cryptocurrency even arrived. It's just that when you change the operating system of a country, that's at least as important as the change to a policy on COVID. It's a big change, and you don't want to do it lightly. On the other hand, many of us over here truly admire China for the way in which it's done it. So it's been a pilot, which is of course the right way to do it. You rolled the pilot out to a really large group of people. You incentivized them to use the system. You had it at your major sporting events recently. So it's been really interesting. But over here in the West, we actually get very little news about it. And so this is possibly the one question I'm desperate to hear your thoughts on. How's it going with the Chinese CBDC experiment? Yeah. And what do you think the effect would be on your economy and on trade?
Yeah, well, actually, I have to admit it. I really still trying to figure out what we can do and what this can, central bank digital currency could do. We are still not very clear, actually. But I have this kind of the guess of what's going on. Well, first of all, the cryptocurrency is not a currency for me. It's assets. It's a speculation, the investment assets, like a like an index in the stock market. So you can bet on everything, and this is a nest token you can bet on. So it's assets. It's not a currency. It's an asset. How much it's worth? It's worth something like $100. It's in terms of other currency, the real currencies. But for the digital currency, I would like to argue that actually digitalization of currency already happened a long time ago. Think about the credit card. Credit card is kind of the digitalization, right? When you have a credit card, if your salary is transferred from your employer's account to your account, and then you spend all the money, you pay your payment, your purchase by credit card, then in the whole year you will not see any kind of the paper currency. So it's already, for you, it's already a digit. It's kind of numbers on the screen, either on your computer, on your mobile phone, or on the ATM machine. So it's already digital. And then we have this payment system, Payball, WeChat, there's all the smartphone, the iPhone have a payment system, and the Huawei have its own payment system. It's become more digital. In China, after the pandemic, in 3 years, definitely, literally, I never use any paper money again. In past 3 years, it's all digital. So the digitalization of currency already happened. However, I would argue this is a decentralized digital currency, the digitalization of currency. So currency is still issued by the central bank, but the payment system, banking system, the credit card are issued by the banks or the platforms or the smartphone companies, or the, maybe we have a, this is called a Meta and a Libra issue. That's also the platform digitalization. It's not the issue, the currency is still issued by the central bank. Yeah. Now we have a central bank issue the digital currency. I would like to call that is a centralization of digitalization of currency. So the currency is still a currency which you need a sovereignty, you need authority, you need a government support, you need a legal system support. That's a currency, but it's a more digitalization. The difference between the centralized digitalization and the decentralized digitalization is that now, with the centralized digitalization, the central bank can get the information of transaction and all kind of the payments directly from the consumers to the central bank system. Before, when you have a decentralized system, central bank have to collect the data of the transaction, or prove the transaction from the different banks, financial institutions, and then the online payment system. It's a decentralized information system, and then your central bank have to collect data from them. The first things, consumer data were collected by the institutions, and then central bank collect data from institutions. But now with the central bank digital money, central bank can directly get the information of all the payments using that central bank digital money. So that's what happened in China actually. I don't know. I think I have some central bank money in my account. Well, that's given by the government, given by the central bank as a kind of a word when you registered a central bank digital currency account. But I don't know if I want to use it, because using other way of payment is very convenient. It's maybe more convenient than the central bank money. Well, if I used to that, central bank money could be as the same, as convenient as the same as others, but it's not more convenient anyway. And I don't know if there's special uses. So basically, I would say for the domestic money user, I don't see the difference between centralized or decentralized for the consumer itself. But international trade, if people all use the central bank currency, then you can directly make the trade between the central bank and the central bank, right? Here in the country, one central bank and many institutions. So it doesn't matter if I deal with the central bank directly or deal with the institutions directly for the consumers. But if I doing the international trade and I have to got the the issue like the currency exchange rate, then maybe it's more convenient for the transactions between the central bank and the central bank. That's a prospect for the use of this the central bank digital currency. So frankly speaking, I'm not because I'm doing the business, I'm not doing the international trade, and I think the digital currency is still not be useful for the international trade. But looking at the future, looking at the possibilities, I would say maybe that's make the international transactions more convenient, more easy for different country, between the different central bank. So that's my imagination of this issue. But basically, I would say think about the digitalization first, then think about the digital currency, how the differences.
I find myself agreeing with you immensely. It's one, it's not new. We are digital. Two, to the consumer, probably nothing. Three, a potentially good effect on central bank to central bank, and therefore some trade issues. But I do think the economic numbers might improve. I think as well there's some potential issues with credit. We rely actually on a very slow credit system, and this would speed it up, and it might cause some credit. But those will be adjustments we can make, I suspect. And I think interestingly, the pandemic in some countries, particularly in America, oddly, when they wanted to get stimulus checks straight out to people, they began to realize that that might be a benefit. So it could oddly be a social welfare benefit more than anything else in many countries, that the government can see what's going on.
Yeah, if the central bank can make the transaction directly to the consumer account, that will be the convenience. That's actually you say there's a social welfare, and that's a reduce the transaction cost in the process.
Yeah. Although I did some testimony to the House of Lords about 6 years ago, and I did point out that it would also permit you to create taxes very quickly. So anyway,
Yeah.
we need to move on, sadly, and we've only got 10 minutes. So but what I'd like to do is, we're all excited about carbon trading. I think rather unfairly, China has taken a lot of flack for its position on carbon. I'm very conscious that something like 15 years ago, I began to see, as I traveled in China, genuine signs about concern of the environment, etc. But China was a developing nation, and some of the flack it takes is about just China's size, population-wise, when I feel it should be based on GDP. I also think there were some inequity discussions. In a sense, we're renting spaces of carbon in the sky. We in the West used it all up. Maybe we should take it down and lend it to other countries for 50 years or something like that, which is not what we talk about over here. We're sort of like, well, that's all up there. We're going to have to leave it. Now, what I got very excited about was finding out years ago that China was interested in emissions trading and using markets to do this, and was doing it on a regional basis. But now with the Chinese emissions trading scheme up and running, something like 20% of global emissions are covered by a credible trading scheme, and those trading schemes are trading at credible prices. And I think all of these trading schemes in total cover about 50% of the relevant markets. So if they go up to 99%, then it would cover well over 40% of global emissions. So it's a very encouraging sign. In addition, Chile in March, which we at CN had a tiny hand in, issued a policy performance bond where the government will pay more interest if it fails to meet its 2030 target. So like an inflation-linked bond. So there's a lot of good stuff going on using markets. I'm also pleased with that because it means this one sliver of environmental social governance can kind of be left out of all the paperwork because the market will solve it. So with that extraordinarily long introduction, and I'm sorry about that, how significant do you think carbon trading will be in the transition to a sustainable economy in China?
Yeah, I would say, as an economist, I would say that's a very important. It's really, I hope it really can play the significant roles in this carbon reduction process. But I think that's the major problem of China's carbon reduction effort. We have all the governmental policy measurement. We have subsidies for the new energy, and the new energy is really developed very fast, and China is in the best position for the renewable energy consumption. And the government have enforcement of the target, the so-called plan target of energy consumption. But only we have all this we call the administrative measures, but it's really lack of the so-called market measures. We haven't have a so-called carbon tax, and we haven't have much carbon trading. Carbon market, you can argue it's already there 10 years, more than 10 years. I think it from 2009, 2008, we already have so-called market, but we never have carbon quotas, carbon permit distribution. So that's the problem. The carbon trade has come up with the name of a cap and the trade, right? We haven't have the cap. The current cap is still, behind the cap of energy consumption. It's not directly a carbon permission. It's a kind of energy consumption permission. So energy consumption quota and the plan. So government is still enforce the energy consumption, not the carbon emission directly. So that's the why I say, well, years ago, government announcing that we will encourage carbon trade, and then we have developed our carbon market, and officially it announced that the carbon market is established and we need to have more carbon trade. But if you don't have a cap, you know, the word of leak of carbon, you know, carbon leak, and people, where is the, you know, people's incentives for the carbon trading? You know, why I have to pay, you know, for my carbon emission? So you need a so-called enforceable, measurable, and verifiable quota, carbon permit. Then you have the market to really function. So that will be the first step. That's we are working with the government, encourage, you know, ask them to move fast. First of all, from the you know, the indirect control of this carbon permission to the direct control, because you know, energy quota actually not favor the new renewable energies. You know, it's a discriminate actually against the renewable the energies. So it's not distinguish, you know, the you know, traditional energy and the new energy. It's just target on the energy consumption. So we need to, first of all, directly have the carbon permission. Then you have cover, you know, totally covering quota system, no leak, and enforceable and verifiable, you know, that kind of things. Then you have more people, more company, regional government to have the incentives to buy the carbon emission permit. So it's still a long way to go. But I would say people now have very much interested in this, and I believe the market forces is there, and the companies are waiting, you know, to look at into this kind of the new trading system, and really people have the feel that they have to join this effort. Yeah.
Well, it sounds as if things in China are the same as they are here. It's getting the governments to enforce those caps when the politics are inconvenient. Let a local power person just kind of do their thing. We've only got a few minutes. This is the last topic area. Christopher Williams typed a question in, which I think is related very much to this bit about cooperation. You know, every government looks at its own economic structure, you know, China, the US, Britain. But in developing countries, you know, as we see these recessionary times looming, as we see the price volatility we spoke about earlier, do you see any way we could encourage a better working relationship between the USA, Europe, and China to help the weaker countries, perhaps particularly regarding food supply?
Well, first of all, I would like to see, you know, when looking at this question, the Cold War definitely not a good way for the cooperation for the world economy progress. You know, you have to have the you know, kind of the, you know, cooperation, you know, working together and with this, you know, same target. And then for the other, you know, how to help others, for particularly developing countries, I would say that thing is very important to think about the interest of those people. You know, some country now think themselves, they want to achieve their strategic goals, even at the expenses of other countries' people's interest. They even don't care the other countries' people go back to poverty, you know, to lose their prosperities and go back to the poverty, the hunger, and all those. So you have to think about what they want, and people want better, you know, life. They have enough food, and they want to have a better, you know, the future for their children. So that's basically we need to to think about their needs. So that's what I say, to think about what the most helpful for them to start their economic development. Not from your point of view. For example, we just talk about the energy, the carbon emission, the global warming. Well, for those local people, the global warming would be the issue. But when you take the global warming as a priority, but think about the priorities of those people in the locality, in the developing country. The hunger may be the first one, priorities. Education and transportations, those kind of things may be as a priority. So think of priorities, think about interest of people, and that's the good start of cooperation.
Well, it's a great place at which end. It's almost the golden rule, do unto others as you would have others do unto you. And folks, I'm absolutely thrilled that Professor Fan has spent this amount of time with us. That is one of the great things we're going to have cooperation, is keeping these dialogues going. And Professor Fan, your erudition and your insights are greatly appreciated. To hear it directly from you rather than filtered by so many forms of press. And it's a delight for me, of course, that your English is so excellent, because it means that you convey everything beautifully. I hope that we continue these discussions from time to time, because it is an important insight to hear directly from people what they're thinking, and not through so many channels. And Professor Fan, you are a wonderful ambassador for cooperation between peoples, and we very much enjoy working with you and your support at China Development Institute for us here at Zien, for our indices, and for the FS Club. So with
my
that,
pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you
for joining.
Take care.
Thank you.